Somewhere in a classified training compound, a rifle that most of the world has never fired is being tested against sandstorms, freezing rain, and jungle humidity, all in the same week. China does not parade its special forces arsenal the way other nations do. For decades, entire units trained in total secrecy, their names withheld from the public for years after they were formed. Their equipment followed the same pattern, appearing without warning at a parade, then vanishing back into classified service. What we know today comes from fragments, leaked prototypes, state media segments, and the rare demonstration meant to send a message. Piecing it all together feels a little like assembling a puzzle where half the pieces were never meant to be found. Tonight, we lay those pieces out on the table. From a bullpup rifle that broke every rule of Soviet design to a helicopter built to rival the Black Hawk, this is the hardware behind China's most secretive commandos, and some of it is stranger than you would expect. Chapter 1. Assault Rifles, China's Break from the Past. In 1997, the People's Liberation Army fielded a rifle that looked like nothing that came before it. The QBZ-95 was bullpup in layout, meaning the action and magazine sit behind the trigger, packing a full-length barrel into a compact frame. Development had actually started years earlier, in the late 1980s, with a single goal in mind: replacing the aging Type 81 rifle with something entirely Chinese. It fired a cartridge nobody outside China was using, the 5.8 by 42mm round, developed specifically to outperform both NATO's 5.56 and the Soviet 5.45. Chinese engineers claimed it split the difference between the two, delivering flatter trajectories and better penetration at range. It was, without exaggeration, the first rifle family designed entirely from a blank sheet in Chinese small arms history, with no direct lineage to Kalashnikov patterns or Western designs, right down to a distinctive forward-mounted foregrip meant to improve control during automatic fire. Soldiers loaded it from a 30-round polymer magazine, and two magazines could be clamped together side by side for a faster reload under fire, a trick borrowed from decades of infantry doctrine. State media claimed the rifle matched the accuracy of the American M16A3 and the reliability of the AK-74. Independent testing never confirmed that. What is confirmed is that within a few years, the QBZ-95 stopped being a Special Forces exclusive and became the default rifle across the entire PLA and the People's Armed Police, arming everyone from border guards to the counter-terror operators of Snow Leopard, and it remains the rifle carried by the ceremonial guard units seen on state television to this day. It even found its way into foreign service, exported in limited numbers to Cambodia, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka. It had one real weakness, though. The bullpup layout made it awkward to modify. There was no easy way to bolt on modern rails, scopes, or foregrips without buying separate aftermarket kits, and that flaw would eventually cost the rifle its place at the top. An improved version, the QBZ-95-1, arrived years later with a heavier barrel, better ammunition, and relocated controls. But by then, the writing was already on the wall for the bullpup design. That same weakness, engineers addressed differently. Sharing the identical internal action as the QBZ-95, the QBB-95, officially known as the QJB-95, was built to solve a different problem: keeping a fire team fed with suppressive fire. It uses the same 5.8 by 42mm cartridge, but in a heavier loading known as the DBP-88, and trades the rifle's 30-round magazine for a 75-round drum. The barrel runs longer and thicker, built to handle sustained bursts without warping under heat, and a folding bipod steadies it during extended engagements. It cannot mount an underbarrel grenade launcher, and it cannot fire rifle grenades, deliberate compromises that kept the weapon light enough for a single operator to carry and fire alone, without a dedicated assistant gunner trailing behind. In special operations use, it typically travels with the smallest element of a squad, the one soldier tasked with keeping an enemy's head down while everyone else moves. This one never got much recognition. 22 years later, China started over. On the 1st of October 2019, during the parade marking 70 years of the People's Republic, columns of soldiers marched past, carrying a rifle nobody had officially seen before. The QBZ-191 abandoned the bullpup layout entirely, returning to a conventional stock in front of the trigger, the same basic silhouette as an American M4 or a Russian AK. This was not nostalgia, it was a fix. Development had begun quietly around 2014, run out of Norinco's 208 Research Institute, the same design house behind the QBZ-95, with prototypes leaking online in 2016 and 2017, long before anything was official. The new design left room for a full-length rail on top and modular attachment points along the handguard, exactly the kind of accessory mounting the QBZ-95 struggled with for over 2 decades. It still fires the 5.8 by 42 mm round, now in an upgraded loading called DBP-191, switched over to brass casings instead of the older corrosion-prone steel and lacquer-coated cases, and cycling at roughly 750 rounds a minute. The family splits into 3 configurations from one core platform: a standard rifle with a 14.5-inch barrel, a compact carbine called the QBZ-192 with a 10.5-inch barrel for vehicle crews and close-quarters teams, and a designated marksman variant, the QBU-191, stretching the barrel out for an effective range near 800 meters, all 3 sharing enough common parts to simplify maintenance in the field. For special operations units like Jiaolong and the Thunder Gods, the QBZ-191, part of what China now calls its Type 20 weapon family, represents the first rifle in a generation actually designed around soldier feedback. It just took the PLA over 20 years, and one quietly abandoned attempt in between, the QBZ-03, to admit the original bullpup layout was not working. Chapter 2: Precision Rifles, Watching from Beyond the Wire. Long before the QBZ-191 existed, Chinese snipers, or more accurately, designated marksmen, carried the QBU-88. Adopted in the late 1990s, it was the very first weapon in the entire 5.8 mm family, arriving even before the standard rifle it would eventually complement. Calling it a sniper rifle slightly overstates what it is. It is gas-operated and semi-automatic, built to extend a squad's effective range out to somewhere between 500 and 1,000 meters, not to compete with a dedicated bolt-action system built for true long-range interdiction. Its heavy loaded round uses a streamlined bullet with a steel core, paired with either a 3x9x40 or, for law enforcement and counter-terror use, a 6x24x44 telescopic sight introduced in 2008, specifically for units that operate as much in cities as in open country. It loads from a 10-round box magazine, a small capacity by sniper rifle standards, but one that keeps the weapon light enough to move with a fast advancing assault element rather than a static observation post. For over 2 decades, it filled the gap between rifle and true sniper system, serving with both the PLA and Chinese police forces along the way, respected for its accuracy even by soldiers who never warmed to its ergonomics. It is now being phased out, gradually handed down from special operations units to reserve and border formations, and its replacement says a great deal about where China wants this capability to go next. That replacement takes precision much further. This one rarely appears on camera. The CS/LR4 is not a designated marksman rifle at all. It is a dedicated bolt-action precision system, chambered in either 8.6 by 70 mm or 338 Lapua Magnum, depending on export configuration. Calibers built for one purpose: hitting confirmed targets at distances the QBU-88 was never meant to reach. Norinco developed it as the eventual heir to that older platform, positioning it inside special operations units where a single, confirmed shot matters more than a high volume of fire. The kind of weapon a two-man team might carry for hours across difficult terrain just to take one deliberate shot at the right moment. Where the QBU-191 covers a squad's own extended range, the CS/LR-4 exists for the missions that call for genuine long-distance interdiction instead. Less is publicly known about the CS/LR-4 than almost anything else in this arsenal. Chinese state media rarely showcases it, and most of what has been confirmed comes through defense trade catalogs rather than parade footage. That silence is unusual for a country that tends to showcase its hardware loudly. It suggests the rifle, or the units carrying it, are still considered sensitive enough to keep off camera entirely, which, in a country that loves showing off its hardware, is a statement all its own. Chapter 3: Sidearms and Silence, the Close Quarters Toolkit. Every Special Forces operator eventually ends up in a fight too close for a rifle. That is where the Type 05 pistol series comes in, built around the QSZ-92 platform, adopted in the late 1990s as the PLA's standard sidearm. It is a short recoil, locked breech design with a rotating barrel lock, weighing under a kilogram unloaded, and it comes in two chamberings, a 9x19mm parabellum version for compatibility with foreign ammunition standards, and a 5.8x21mm version that ties into China's broader shift toward proprietary calibers across the entire small arms family. In 2011, a compact variant joined the lineup, the QSZ-11, a genuinely small pistol weighing barely over half a kilogram, carrying just 8 rounds, with a muzzle velocity around 350 meters a second and an effective range of only 50 meters, built for close protection and plainclothes work rather than open combat, small enough to disappear under a jacket during a diplomatic security detail. The full-sized QSZ-92 remains the standard-issue sidearm for everyone else, holstered on the hip of nearly every operator in this arsenal. The logic behind the smaller round was not stopping power, it was logistics. That same 5.8x21mm cartridge feeds the pistol, its compact variant, and one other weapon in this arsenal built specifically to be heard by no one at all. A single logistics chain running from a diplomat's bodyguard all the way to a hostage rescue team clearing a stairwell. That other weapon barely makes a sound. The QCW-05, sometimes referred to by its export designation CF5, translates loosely from Chinese as the Silenced Assault Gun of 2005, a bullpup submachine gun developed between 2001 and 2005, specifically to retire an aging silenced pistol design dating back to the 1960s, one whose worn-out integral suppressors and thin magazine capacity had become a real liability by the early 2000s. Firing a subsonic loading of that same 5.8x21mm cartridge, its muzzle velocity drops to roughly 150 meters a second, slow enough that the round never breaks the sound barrier, which is where most of a gunshot's noise actually comes from in the first place. The trade-off is range, an effective envelope of only about 50 meters. But for a weapon meant for building clearance and hostage rescue, that limitation rarely matters. It cycles at close to 900 rounds a minute and feeds from a 50-round magazine stacked in 4 columns, one of the largest capacities of any weapon in this entire lineup. Snow Leopard's hostage rescue teams train with it specifically for scenarios where a single shot needs to end a threat without alerting anyone in the next room. The kind of weapon that only ever gets noticed when something has already gone badly wrong. Its literal Chinese name gives away exactly what it was built for. Nothing subtle about that at all. Chapter 4: Firepower and Breach, when the door will not open. Not every problem in a special operations raid can be solved with a rifle. Sometimes there is a wall, a barricaded room, or a vehicle blocking an extraction route, and that is exactly what the PF-98 was built for. Entering service around the year 2000, this reusable 120mm rocket launcher weighing close to 9 kilograms combat-ready, replaced a line of aging recoilless rifles, the Type 78 and the Type 65, weapons whose design traced back to the 1960s. Mounted on a tripod for stability, or fired from the shoulder in a pinch, the PF-98 gives an assault team the ability to defeat light armor or punch straight through a fortified structure in seconds, out to roughly 800 meters against a stationary target with the right round, a job that used to require calling in support from well outside the assault team itself. In 2006, an upgraded PF-98A entered service, trimming the launch tube's weight and adding a digital fire control sight, a small but meaningful change for a two-person crew hauling the weapon across rough terrain under load. It is not glamorous. It rarely appears in parade footage next to sleeker rifles and helicopters. But when a direct action unit like Jiaolong needs to end a standoff instead of prolonging it, this is often the weapon that gets called forward first, ahead of anything firing a bullet. Not every weapon needs to look impressive. Chapter 5. Mobility and Insertion, Getting There First. Special forces are only as fast as the vehicle carrying them, and for 2 decades that vehicle has largely been the Dongfeng Mengshi, a name that roughly translates to fierce warrior. Its origins are not subtle. Early versions were closely modeled on the American Humvee, right down to the general silhouette, though later generations moved toward a fully indigenous design tested extensively in low-temperature chambers to guarantee it starts and runs in the coldest reaches of China's northern borders. Built in both 4x4 and up-armored 6x6 configurations, the Mengshi carries teams over terrain that would stop a standard truck cold, from mountain trails to flooded roads, with certain armored versions capable of stopping rifle-caliber rounds up to 7.62 mm, and a double-floor design intended to disperse blast energy from mines and roadside explosives. The third generation entered mass production in August 2021, with hundreds of units rolling off the line in the very first batch alone, part of a production run described by Chinese state media as running into the tens of thousands over the following years. Variants branch out well beyond simple troop transport, including armored personnel carrier configurations, a dedicated medical evacuation version, mortar carriers, a version fitted to launch anti-tank guided missiles, and one variant built specifically to launch a swarm of drones from a moving vehicle. For units like the Siberian Tiger Special Forces, built around long-range reconnaissance in brutal terrain, a reliable all-weather vehicle is not a luxury. It is the difference between completing a mission and being stranded 100 kilometers from support. Western analysts often place it in the same rough category as America's Humvee successors, a comparison Chinese engineers seem entirely comfortable with, given how openly the original design borrowed from it. Getting there by road has its limits though. When the mission calls for speed, measured in minutes, not hours, China turns to the Z-20. Entering service in 2019, this twin-engine medium-lift helicopter draws obvious comparisons to America's Black Hawk, and Chinese engineers do not shy away from that comparison. They built the Z-20 specifically to close that exact capability gap. It carries roughly 20 personnel per aircraft, enough for a full assault element plus support gear, and it has been filmed conducting fast rope insertions escorted by Z-10 attack helicopters, providing cover from above, ground troops sliding down ropes into a landing zone in a matter of seconds. In 2022, the People's Armed Police began receiving their own Z-20 seconds, extending genuine rapid insertion capability to domestic counter-terror units like Snow Leopard and Falcon Commando, units that previously relied on ground transport or older helicopter designs for anything beyond a slow, telegraphed approach. A 5-bladed rotor and fly-by-wire controls give it a real edge in high-altitude environments, exactly the kind of terrain found across Tibet and China's western frontier, where thinner air grounds less capable aircraft entirely. Naval variants have followed since, including a shipboard utility version and an anti-submarine model with dipping sonar, alongside a dedicated attack version called the Z-21. but the core airframe carrying commandos toward a target remains the same machine that rolled out in 2019, still being drilled into ground units through low-altitude penetration exercises today. As recently as May 2026, state media documented a brigade under the Northern Theater Command folding the Z-20T assault variant into a full air-ground coordination training cycle, flying troops in at extremely low altitude before dropping them directly onto the objective, terrain masking used to stay under the reach of hostile radar the whole way in. Chapter 6. The Next Generation, Still in the Workshop. Not everything in this arsenal is finished. Chinese defense expos, Zhuhai among them, have repeatedly shown off powered exoskeletons designed to strap onto a soldier's lower body and legs, reducing fatigue during long marches under heavy loads. These are not combat armor in the way science fiction tends to imagine them. There is no bullet resistance built into the frame. What they offer instead is endurance, letting a soldier carry ammunition, water, and equipment over distances that would otherwise wear a body down long before any contact with an enemy, shifting load-bearing away from the spine and knees and into a powered frame strapped to the legs. Paired with a broader push toward what Chinese state media calls the digitized soldier, wearable power packs, and integrated sensor systems, the exoskeleton fits China's long-term bet that mountain and airborne units, the ones covering the most ground, with the least outside support, stand to benefit the most from a bit of mechanical help, echoing similar experimental programs quietly running in the United States and across parts of Europe, none of which have fully left the testing phase either. This one still is not finished. While legs get an upgrade, eyes go smaller. Reconnaissance used to mean a soldier crawling through brush with a pair of binoculars. Now, increasingly, it means a drone doing the crawling instead. Units like the Jiaolong Commandos have been filmed testing hand-launched micro-drones, some small enough to disappear into a tree line, and in one particularly striking case, shaped and feathered to genuinely resemble a bird in flight, footage that only surfaced publicly in the last couple of years and caught foreign analysts off guard. The goal is not subtle, blending a surveillance platform into a natural environment so completely that nobody on the ground looks twice. These systems feed into what Chinese military planners describe as quadphibious operations, the ability to infiltrate by land, sea, air, and underwater, all coordinated through a single, shared reconnaissance picture. How widely these bird-shaped drones have actually been fielded, rather than simply demonstrated for cameras, remains genuinely unclear. What does seem certain is that the era of a special forces operator relying solely on his own two eyes is quietly, steadily coming to an end. A shift mirrored by similar small reconnaissance drones now entering service with special operations units worldwide. Chapter 7. Standard Kit, the gear nobody notices. Underneath every headline weapon sits a layer of equipment that rarely earns its own spotlight, but without it, none of the rest actually works. Modern optics across these units have shifted decisively toward rail-mounted red dot sights and variable magnification scopes, the CS/OS-20A among them, a 4 to 15 power optic paired with the QBU-191 for engagements that shift from close quarters to several hundred meters without ever swapping the weapon, alongside compact thermal and night vision binoculars that let a team move and observe long after the sun goes down. Body armor has moved through a similarly quiet revolution, older vest designs giving way to modular plate carriers that let an operator strip weight down for a room-clearing operation, then add it straight back on for a prolonged firefight, with communications, gear, and radios now built directly into the harness rather than bolted on as an afterthought, and gloves and eyewear rated to survive both a breach and a firefight in the same afternoon. None of it eye-catching, all of it standard issue now across every unit in this arsenal. The difference between a team that succeeds quietly and one that does not succeed at all. And when a door needs to open on someone else's terms, breaching gear closes the gap between planning and execution, mechanical rams for speed, shaped explosive charges when speed alone is not enough to get the job done, and simple hand tools like bolt cutters and pry bars for the moments when nothing more dramatic is required. Snow Leopard and Falcon Commando train on these tools constantly because in a hostage rescue, the piece of equipment that matters most is often the one that gets a team through a door in under 2 seconds. None of it makes for a dramatic parade photo. All of it decides whether an operation actually succeeds.